Good morning, Rev Walter here. It is Monday, the 3rd of March. Can you imagine? We're literally going past the quarter of the year. And this is why you realize, I don't know if it's something to do with age, that as you old age, time moves faster. I don't know if that's the case, or it's a case of just the reality of what's going. But whatever the case, you get a very strong feeling that as you grow older, time moves faster. And so because it moves faster, there's a higher sense of urgency when it comes to whatever it is that we deal with in life and just getting things in order. So anyway, that aside, this morning I am here to continue my little series. It should end either this week or next week, as in today or next week. And then on Wednesday, I may finish it off, but it's all to do with neuro leadership. And if those of you who may recall or remember, I did touch on it last week. But before I do so, let me mention that we come through with the 8 a.m. Mentorship Academy. We run with this every single weekday unless there is special issues that are preventing us. So normally on Monday, it's yours truly. On Tuesday, we have Dr. Sunshine Sylvia. She comes through with a mindset change program. Wednesdays is the open market, and so we present topics around things we're marketing. So this Wednesday I'll still continue marketing the neuro leadership class, which is what I'm taking you through. And then on Thursdays we have Dr. Nelly with her platform Prosperity for Your Soul. And Fridays is still open. We're still working with a key partner who is going to be coming in very soon to take up that space, but that's the health and wellness space. So that will be on Friday. So Wednesday is when we market our key products as individuals. So we usually circulate or take turns between each other. And then sometimes we have guests who come through and feature their own line of products. And by the way, Dr. Sunshine, yesterday I had the privilege of actually meeting Madam Ruth Mugala. It was very nice. I bumped into her at ShopRite Pinnacle. I think she was just coming from church or something. And she was telling me that she's coming through to see you for the Agora meeting. So it was just nice to see her. I always, it's interesting when you watch stuff on camera and then you meet the real person. So she looked taller. She looks taller on screen here than she did in real life. She was like, oh, well, I was expecting. Anyway, so, Auntie Beatrice Nyatanda is one of my dear other mothers. And so she's quite tall. So even when you meet her, she's got a tall, imposing figure. And so I always thought about Ruth is also in the same boat. But anyway, so it was nice to meet her. It was nice to interact. She told me she was coming through to see you. So anyway, so here we are. So let's jump straight into the lesson, ladies and gentlemen. And today we're looking at why employees are disengaged. Like, what are the factors that lead to disengagement of employees? Now, for those of you who may not be familiar, I did a recap on culture. I was looking at culture, and that's the topic here. Just culture and why things go wrong. So this is the second part of it. And we talked about what it entails culture in a workplace. I mentioned to you that culture sits on 3 pillars: people, practices, environment. I also mentioned to you that culture and leadership kind of go hand in hand. So what the leader does is what the people do. Remember, monkey see, monkey do. I didn't mention that last week, but that's what it is. Monkey see, monkey do. What the leader does and says is going to have a far greater impact than what the leader just says. So people will copy how the leader handles things, and then they'll kind of mimic that. So leadership makes a huge difference if it is based upon see what I do and copy it. That's why great leaders lead by showing, not by saying. And that creates a very powerful culture as well. And so we looked at 3 things. We said culture is made of 3 things: people, practices, and environment. We talked about people. Competence, skilled, and motivated individuals are the ones that create the best possible solution when it comes to, culture. Then number 3, practices, policies, systems, procedures, meetings. And then we talked about environment, which is resources, tools, and equipment, and the actual work environment itself. Now, today I want to delve into why employees are disengaged and kind of build on that. So first of all, a Gallup Poll was carried out some years back in which over 47,000 employees in 120 countries across the world were surveyed. So this is a very detailed survey, one of the best surveys out there. And it was discovered as follows. 11% of employees across the board were emotionally connected to their workplaces and felt they have the resources and support they need to succeed. 11%. And then 62% were emotionally detached and are just doing enough to keep their jobs. So in other words, it's just about the salary. Once they earn their salary, they are done. They're not really interested in working beyond that. So that's a very interesting development for that particular group. And then the third group, what we call actively disengaged. I'll get into those. So the actively disengaged were individuals who were not just, they view their workplaces negatively and are liable to spread negativity to others. So these are not just guys who were not comfortable with their workplaces, but these are guys that would actually go out there and actively work negatively. So they would go and tell people, you know, like for example, if a boss came and gave some particular job or gig, these are the type of people that would go back to the individuals that have been sent and say to them, are you going to do that? Why are you even going ahead to do that? You know, like, I wouldn't do it. And they would go on to speak very negative things to those individuals to such an extent that the other individuals would now become infected by it. These are the people that would joke about here in Zambia. You know, a lot of ministers, PSs, directors would go into these quasi-government and government positions, including the council. And many of them go in with so much zeal because, you know, when you're getting a new job, even workers, even new people, employees, they tend to go in with a lot of zeal because you want to go there, you want to be diligent, you want to serve. But what you find is a culture immediately hits you, and the culture is so negative. These are the people that would say to you things like, oh, so anyway, you know, they'll start. And that terminology there, for those who are not from Zambia, it simply means they say, oh, so you really think you have what it takes? We'll see. You know, like they really throw this at you to such an extent that it really puts dampers in what you're trying to do. It just becomes so discouraging. And one of the most famous phrases I've ever heard when it comes to this particular way of operating is where somebody, you know, I remember many years ago, National Assembly, I used to supply a lot of herbal remedies and products. And I had a very good arrangement with management through what they call the medical clerk. And so I would go around offices and share the products I have and what it's all about. And it was so interesting. I remember one time sitting with one of the directors in one of the, you know, the departments, I think committees or research, one of the two. And as I was speaking with this director, I remember him pointing at a paper and saying, do you see that paper there? That paper has been there for the last 6 days. I said, you're joking. Yeah. But you know, these people would come clean and go. And you know, one time he was talking about that to one of the PSs in the ministry. And the PS was so particular about a particular issue and made a bit of noise about it. And when he was making that noise, you know what the sweeper told him? The sweeper, janitor of the ministry said to him, boss, mverani, munabwera, mwatipeza, muzachokapo muzatisia. And that translated means, you came, you found us, you go and leave us. So in short, I'll do it when I want to do it, you do your own thing. And you know, I remember one time, I won't mention which ministry, but I went to see the PS. And I was sitting in that room with lots of people waiting online to see the PS. And I remember the PS coming out of the room to give from his office, to give instructions to the secretary. And you could tell the vibe was bad because the secretary was like literally rolling her eyes. I'm telling you, to the PS. You're like, wow, that's the kind of attitude they have to deal with. So this thing about work culture is no joke, my friends. It's one of the biggest dampers. And I will always say without any apology that the council, I don't know about other councils, but they must be just as bad, is the worst, most depressing department to visit when it comes to government. Because the council make Ministry of Lands look like the bank, like they are so available to serve. But when you go to the council, it's so depressing. If you're told this is an officer in the department of whatever, just to find that officer is next to impossible. And you know, I remember recently, I'm not shy to say this because it's true. Recently, we were trying to get what they call an occupancy license for my wife's late mother's property in Tendere. And I'm telling you, you know, just the attitude we got from these people. And you know, that's the reason why so many people end up paying bribes. It's not that we want to pay those bribes. Really, honestly, you don't want to pay bribes. But that's they even tell you, Kuti, boss, if you don't pay, it's gonna take forever for this thing to happen. And imagine they're telling you that on purpose. So obviously what that means is they create and encourage a culture of corruption. And so if you don't pay, they mark your paper and they just make sure they never serve you. And unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, that's what we're dealing with. So that kind of workplace culture permeates every aspect of government. It's depressing. When I was working with National Assembly, I just want to emphasize this. National Assembly is, well, the National Assembly I worked with, very professional when it comes to how they operate. Everything about them, whether it's the research department, whether it's the committees, whether it's services, whether it's journals, especially journals, because of having to transcribe all that work and make sure they put things in order to guide. Then there was the procedures, then there was medical, there was services, there was security. All these departments worked professionally. When you go to National Assembly, it was another thing. And IT, you know, information and technology, which is where the television station, the radio stations at National Assembly, and the internet platforms like the website sit. Very professionally run. The only places I know where they have that level of professionalism is Bank of Zambia, because Bank of Zambia is absolutely top notch. You can't even believe it's government. And then Zambia Revenue Authority. I always bring in Zambia Revenue Authority because I think they do brilliant. The Zambia Revenue Authority is definitely better than some of the private entities that run. I can't mention them because they won't hire me. As in, when I say private, I mean private within government, like quasi-government. So meaning under the IDC. So under the IDC, you've got certain departments, or not departments, companies, corporations that really leave much to be desired. I mean, I've got colleagues and friends of mine who've now been appointed into those organizations. And I remember even joking with some of them and saying, good luck, because where you're going, I mean, we talk about cultural transformation. You are going into the very pit of hell when it comes to cultural negativity. Just the whole environment is so negative. And you know, I want to even emphasize this further. I was also hired to go to one of the leading corporations to do corporate change. I mean, to do culture change and transformation, organizational transformation and change management. I mean, you won't believe if I told you this. They send me to do, me and a number of colleagues, to do corporate transformation and culture change. And then you send me to go work with the directors, not directors, with the management and blue collar, and no exco is present. And I remember asking one of my co-colleagues, co-presenters, I'm like, sir, where are the exco? They're not there. So you when you start doing the presentation, everybody's agreeing with you, and they're saying, exco need to hear this, exco need to hear this. And then you do a proposal, send it to them, it goes nowhere. And so you start to understand the frustration that comes with being in some of these organizations. And yet I will not even fault the heads of some of these places, because, for example, recently, when it's a plus, I'll mention. When it's a minus, I'm not mentioning names. So for the plus, I'll mention. I had the privilege of going and doing culture transformation with Zambia National Public Health Institute, which is ZNPHI. That's ZNPHI. I tell you, that was refreshing, because you're dealing with a director and a key number of directors who are so proactive, given the limited resources they have, given the challenges they face working within government. And then to make matters worse, these are people that are also dealing with real-time crisis, like when they have disease outbreaks and stuff like that. And they were able to manage these powerfully. Why? Because even the leadership of those organizations is at a whole other level. So you realize that even the culture, I mean, I remember when we did the ZNPHI workshop in Livingston, doing a whole event, I was quite impressed with the attitude of the director. And by the way, he's not the only one. I've had the privilege of also dealing with some of the other organizations, and the directors would come with a very positive, change-centered approach. So very, very good leadership. I remember Zambia Bureau of Standards as well, which also had a very, very dynamic leader at the time. I haven't dealt with the new one, so I wouldn't know. But Mr. Manuela, who used to be the head of Lusaka Water. So again, that man, very different attitude. So you start to realize, I mean, this ZNPHI was Dr. Roma Chilengi, is Dr. Roma Chilengi. So you find that there are individuals in some of the culture, but ZNPHI sits in a very unique space because they sit alone and they work very closely with a lot of through donor funding. And so their whole drive is different. Even their objectives and how they work is different. So when you get to interact with them, you realize they're dealing with absolute professionals. So I can equate them to the National Assembly. For me, I have not come across any organization in Zambia besides National Assembly and Bank of Zambia with that level of positive culture, especially from a government standpoint. So these are government, and sometimes you get, but even they themselves, they would not tell, I can't say who, but many of them would actually get frustrated when dealing with some of the line ministries, because many times, remember, they are the bosses of those ministries, i.e. the ministers or in fact, the ministers, because the ministers would get information from the PS. So a lot of these ministries would need to get the minister to do a ministerial statement. So many times people from research would have to get in touch with people from the ministry to prepare ministerial statements, and they would face the frustrations, not all times, but sometimes, of having the delayed information. But the beauty is, because it's the minister making a statement, everybody jumps, even in the ministry. If the minister wants certain information because there was a paper that was raised, that, oh, these are the questions, honorable member of parliament for wherever has raised the following questions, because normally the way National Assembly works is they don't have random questions except for the vice president question and answer time. But most times questions are asked in advance, questions are prepared, questions are forwarded to the ministers and the relevant authorities. The relevant authorities forward to their juniors in the ministries, and they come back. But what you notice is that even then, it's so frustrating. There are times when people from National Assembly have to go and literally sit and camp in the ministry to extract certain information. Now imagine those are within the system. Can you imagine those of us who come from outside the system? It's a nightmare. So this workplace culture thing is huge. And to be very honest with you, I believe that this disengagement is probably part of the reason why so many administrations, so many of our leaders would come into office and then struggle. And you know what, if you think this is just localized to Zambia or Africa, I mean, look at the current goings on. Very interesting to watch. That's happening in America. I'm personally amazed that a president of Trump's level would find himself getting into loggerheads with his own people in government. There they have a federal government, so it's different. So remember, as a federal government, they also have to deal with the states themselves in their individual capacity. And so the states have their own administrative offices, and then those report to the federal offices or the federal people. And so the wastage that is dealing through the DOGE is Department of Government Expenditure or Efficiency, or whatever it is, with Elon Musk. That whole thing is because of what I'm talking about, this cultural thing. So let me take the last few minutes to walk you through what I now term a gauge to determine where you are as an individual and how you can make sure you become part of change and part of positive transformation rather than being part of. So you've got 5 different categories of individuals in a given institution and cultural mindset. So at the worst level, at the worst of this is what we call the counterproductivity group. Now, these are people that are, they do things by natural instinct. They believe that anything to do with efficiency is run by a particular department, and they are usually, they don't care much about being involved in the day-to-day running except for where they are. So they are very compartmentalized, and they propagate compartmentalization. In other words, they work in silos, and they are very active in negatively fighting other departments as if these are different companies. And you know that this type of culture is very bad. It's the divide and rule, but it doesn't work because it creates a rotten culture and you don't really get the cohesion you expect. So some people are kind of stuck here. They're counterproductive. They are always resisting anything to do with the progress of the company. They don't want to be part of that. So they don't care. So that's the first group. This is the counterproductivity group. These people are part of what I call the actively disengaged. Then you've got the second group, who are the public compliant. So then they'll comply publicly. So when the boss is looking, when the manager is around, when interested powers are around, that's when they'll look like they comply. But when those people are not around, they don't bother. Okay, so and then further, they just want to just meet the standard required by the regulator. That's all. They're never going to go beyond that. And it's not just the regulator, but even for performance, they'll do just enough to keep their job. But they're never going to go out of their way. If it's 5 o'clock, they're out the door. In fact, when it's 4:55, they're actually watching that clock. 5 o'clock, they're gone. It doesn't matter what's sitting on their desk. They don't care about it. As long as it's 5 o'clock, it's time to knock off. And so these types of people are only moved by discipline and fear. So everything that they do is about discipline and fear, not about really believing in what they're producing as a service. They also are big on procedure. They'll just follow what the procedure is, even when sometimes the procedure doesn't make sense, okay? They are also big on just what's the training saying. They are also big on rules being a burden, okay? So they only follow them when management is there. That's why I say that they have this public compliance. They're hypocrites, they're actors. They only act when the boss is there, but the moment the boss is not there, they just go back to what they were doing. And I'm sure you've been to companies where that happens a lot. I'm sure you're even in one where when the boss is there, everybody is jumping around. But the moment the boss goes out, and unfortunately, that type of attitude, I must admit, can be very negative because it doesn't help you to grow, doesn't help the company to grow, and it definitely comes out bad for the individual. Which brings us to the third level. Now, this third level are a bit better. These are the private compliance. Now, these ones have got personal commitment, okay? They have internalized a lot of what the company charter is about, and they have care for self as well as personal value. So they comply privately because they really do believe, but it just about ends there. But they are far better than the public compliance group who act when the boss is there. So they do kind of believe in it, but they don't, go above and beyond the call of duty. They will stick to whatever beauty is. And then there's the next level, which I think is very powerful, which is mateship. This is the one where it's not just about them. It is also about those around them. So they're very good at being ambassadors and being envoys. And so they try to create camaraderie, not just camaraderie, but they help others to do what is right. So it's not just about compliance and following the rules and the regulations and whatever, but it's about also getting everybody else to do the same so that you create a team value. So they have what we call shared values. So these are big on shared values. They understand the concept of what shared values mean and how they help the organization. So they are very big on pushing that. But the best ones are what we call the citizens. Now, the citizens are the ones who actually have organizational pride. So they actually love their company and they are very active in helping others to conform, and they look out for other people, not just when things are right, but even when they are wrong, and they help to hold each other to account. So they have a very magnanimous kind of attitude. So it's not about themselves. They actually go out of their way to not just help others, but to actually help those to achieve what they are achieving. So they are truly sold. In the church, these would be what you'd call disciples. So they are not just coming and attending on Sunday. Because, for example, the third group I talked about, private compliance and public compliance, there's a lot of those in churches. They come, they attend church and do all that jazz, but it's just for show, really, so that the pastor can see that they attended. So when they're done, they'll make sure they greet. Then there are those who completely don't care. So they come in church, they sit behind. When they're done the church, they run off. They don't greet anybody. And then they say the church is full of selfish people. Those are the worst. But the truth is, there's this group over here who go out of their way. They will greet people. They want to know who they are. They'll get their phone numbers. They'll phone them up. So they don't need a position or a title to perform. They will perform even without a title. And for me, that's the true citizenship. That's the true citizens of any organization. Those who don't need to have a title or some kind of endorsement to do certain things. They will go out of the way because they love the company, because they love the job, and because they love what they stand for about the company. So these are the people that really believe what it's all about. So having said that, ladies and gentlemen, that pretty much brings me to the end. So in my next presentation, which will probably be on Wednesday, we'll be looking at the heart of this just culture. The third presentation, the just culture and why things go wrong. And I'm going to show you from this one presentation an illustration about why so many places tend to see certain things go wrong, even when all these things are in place, like safety procedures, checks, compliance. Yet with all that, you still have disaster. So what causes that? So on that note, I want to end here. I'm going to be closing this now and then letting you guys know that I'm doing a follow-up post just now, live again. I want to speak about our tax regime in Zambia and some of the challenges we're facing, and I want to just weigh in on that. So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for coming through. Tomorrow we have Dr. Sunshine. She's on the call. There's a little sign up. She's going to be here doing mindset change. Then you join me on Wednesday as I take you through again the just cause and why so many things can go wrong. Very powerful, illustrative session. That's our last session before I close this whole topic around culture and neuroleadership. So from then, people just have to become part of neuroleadership. So on this note, have a great day. God bless you. Take care of yourselves, and we'll certainly catch you again tomorrow. Adios.